Chapter 159 to 161. Tsunade and Yujito sat on the floor of Koyuki's room, watching the girl play with her dolls as they talked. Rei asked them to keep an eye on the girl, and both decided they could not be bothered with sneaking around, so they asked the owner of the castle to introduce them to the little excitable girl. From there, it went just peachy. A few cheek pinches here, a lot of head pats and head rubs there, and a tiny bit of obvious praise to calm down the flustered pouting girl, and Koyuki officially decided she now has 2 new One-ichan. She is quite cute, right? Yujito wistfully smiled at how innocent the girl around 10 was. Honestly, it was an endearing sight, but when she compared her younger self to Koyuki and remembered what she was doing at that age, it filled her with a desire to brutally murder someone. Preferably the closest councilman from Kumo. Yeah, Tsunade chuckled, her eyes following Koyuki. She reminds me of my younger brother. She sighed sadly. It was not the bitter sigh of the regretful and lost woman, however. Rei made sure she faced the fact Nawaki died head-on, and now Tsunade, while sad about it, no longer dwelled so much on it. It was just something that happened in the past, something unable to be changed. Tsunade actually put quite a lot of thoughts into the research of resurrection jutsu. If her uncle was able to create such a jutsu for combat purposes, was she supposed to be a lesser senju or something? She indeed could bring somebody back to life by now. The problem was it always needed something to balance it off. Sacrifice, lifespan, unimaginable amount of energy. And most importantly, it needed to tinker with soul, and that was the thing which finally convinced Tsunade to just let it go. She was simply unwilling to tinker with the souls of her kin. Alas, after studying the topic, she only hoped her uncle would one day appear in front of her, so she could smack him right into his noggin for creating the impure world reanimation, and not creating a proper failsafe the Senju clan could use against it. Sure, he created and put into the clan library a way for the summoned Senju to break the hold the user had on him. Such a thing was so easy that even a paralyzed genin could do it if he knew the proper way. Problem was, Tobarama probably never imagined the jutsu could be used by anyone other than a Senju. Yet another thing that made Tsunade seething mad at her supposed sensei. How the heck did Senju clan jutsu appear on the Forbidden Scroll? She knew for a fact her uncle never put it down there. His diary certainly said so. What about you and Rei? Did you think about having kids yet? Tsunade was suddenly pulled out of her reverie by Yujito's question. It took her a few seconds to comprehend what her fellow blonde was asking. She blankly blinked before snorting. Do I look like a motherly type? Yes, you look like someone who would like being surrounded by family. Yujito deadpanned, making Tsunade open her mouth, but stay quiet, which made Yujito involuntarily smile. Spot on. Way to go, girl. In the end, Tsunade just sighed heavily before looking at Koyuki, and discerning that the girl was thankfully not paying attention to them in favor of the new wooden doll she was given by her. It's complicated. Having a kid would be easy, you know? Just disabling the anti-pregnancy jutsu for 10 days, and with the pace, we are going at it, but we are all just so busy nowadays. When we were in Kiri, our days were more or less leisure, but now. Rei is shoulders deep in planning, researching, creating these pseudo-bijou of his, taking in refugees, setting up the Yuzushio Trading Company, and now here we are. I help with settling people in after they arrive in Yuzushio, train new medics, help at the hospital. There is just always something going on. I even have to drag him to bed every other day. Tsunade pouted and Yujito giggled. Yeah, you are the only one who ever took Rei by his collar and pulled him out of the living room by force. His expression was just so hilarious. Tsunade cracked a small grin. That's nothing. Konan can be far scarier when she gets going. It's just that she would never direct it at Rei. One time she dragged Ringo to the training ground before leaving her there half dead without care. Fortunately, their relationship improved a lot since then, but still. Wow, what did Ringo do to deserve that? Yujito excitedly asked, and Tsunade showed her a grin before starting to narrate how Ringo jumped at Rei like a bitch in heat, and how Konan gave her a proper beatdown for it. Sorry, Yugi. Tsunade thought, very pleased she managed to change the topic. But kids, huh? With how slow our bodies are aging after being tempered by the nature energy in Rei's dimension, there will be millennia before they lose the ability to reproduce. No rush there. I certainly am not bringing a new Senju onto the world when just one little slip-up would basically mean all of the 5 ninja villages hunting him or her down for the Senju bloodline. Tsunade had no illusions that her kid would be able to use a very potent Mokuton. She theorized that the parents of her grandfather simply had 2 strong Senju bloodline, and Hashirama was gifted with extraordinary sensory ability. He simply could sense nature energy from an early age, somehow discovering how he could create Mokuton through it. It was all just one big coincidence, to be honest. And that was also why the other Senju were completely unable to awaken it. They either lacked sufficient Senju physique or sensory abilities capable of sensing it, no matter how fleetingly. No wonder her grandfather kept quiet every time he was asked about his unusual bloodline. Tsunade and Yujito chatted their time away, going from topic to topic. Tsunade had to admit The younger blonde grew on her during the days they spent together since May brought her from Kumo. She only had no idea if it was because of both of them being blondes or some other mysterious force, but Yujito was very easy to talk to for Tsunade, not to mention amusing. The kitty girl was so easily distracted. At times, Tsunade likened her to a cat staring at a ball of yarn. Yujito suddenly stiffened mid-sentence, her ears perking up as a small breeze ruffled the curtains on the sole open window in the room. Yujito, I think a cup of tea would be lovely. Would you mind bringing some, please? Tsunade asked, making Yujito tilt her head slightly to the right and slowly nod as her shoulders slumped. Yeah. Yujito heaved herself up and leisurely walked towards the door, briefly stopping before her hand reached the handle. Milk or sugar? She innocently blinked, to which Tsunade chuckled. Sugar. Tons of it. Gotcha. With that, Yujito left with a nimble spring in her step, seeming a bit happier and somewhat anticipating. Tsunade also lazily stood up and walked towards Koyuki before gently rubbing her head to get her attention. The pouty girl looked at Tsunade with a small glare, not liking being interrupted from her playtime. So spoiled. Tsunade almost shook her head at the sight, but she knew she could not fault the girl. Growing up with no mother and a daimyo for a father, the people who raised her were servants and paid to fulfill every whim of her. They were servants, period. Tsunade didn't wait for Koyuki to start speaking. That would be stupid. She leaned slightly forward and asked, Do you like butterflies, Koyu? Koyuki, already prepared to give her biggest one-ichan a piece of her mind, stopped in her tracks at the question and scrunched her forehead. She unsurely nodded after a while of pondering. Do you want to see one? Tsunade lifted an eyebrow in a coaxing manner. Are you sure? Tsunade teasingly asked. Then look. Tsunade pointed forward, making Koyuki turn around, her back facing Tsunade. The time almost stopped as Tsunade, who was slightly leaning forward, used her posture to quickly spin her body around on her toes. It was so fast, the man standing behind her, about to plunge kunai into her back, only managed to widen his eyes as Tsunade slugged him into the face, sending his body into the air, causing him to fly through the open window behind him. And while surviving being dropped from high places was a mandatory thing for tree-hopping, chakra-using ninjas, unfortunately for the man, having his cheekbone broken in multiple places was quite distracting, causing him to go splat. While the man was having his last flight, Tsunade used the force of her spin to carry her on her toes, stopping only when she did a whole 360 degrees, ending up in her previous position, just in time to smile at the peeved little girl who didn't manage to find a butterfly. Koyuki was about to protest when she spotted a small, colorful, and finely crafted butterfly made of wood, perching on Tsunade's pointing finger, causing her to whoop in excitement. Tsunade just crouched down and started playing with the girl. 20 minutes later, the door slowly opened, and Yujito walked in, holding a tray with 3 cups of tea. But Tsunade quickly discerned something changed. The air around Yujito was more subdued, satisfied. Yujito put the tray on the floor, where they previously sat, and started sipping on her milk-heavy tea. It didn't take Tsunade long to coax the girl into chasing her new wooden butterfly that could somehow fly. Naturally, Tsunade really appreciated the chakra strings. Sitting down on the opposite side of the tray, Tsunade smiled. Did you have fun? It was sugary. Yujito shrugged and Tsunade snorted, looking at the small, almost indiscernible bit of blood on the cuffs of her right sleeve. A testament that Samahata saw some use in the previous minutes. Milk always calmed Yujito down, while sugar gave her so much energy, she just had to get a proper beat down from May, or be all fidgety for the whole day. The second Tsunade told her tons of sugar. It basically meant go nuts. How many? Tsunade asked as she took her cup of tea and grimaced the second she took a sip. Sugary indeed, she mumbled, causing Yujito to chuckle, and wordlessly put the third cup of tea in front of Tsunade, who gave her a small glare. 20. Not bad. High chunin, maybe? For a small village such as Kaioshin, it is a considerable force considering they mostly give guys like this rank of jonin. She said as if she was talking about the weather, but Tsunade only shrugged. 10 minutes later, a disheveled, bloodied, exhausted, panting and high on adrenaline Kakashi, with an ANBU mask strapped onto his face, barged into the room with kunai in his hand. Ready to? And then he froze the second his eyes landed on the leisurely sitting Tsunade, sipping her tea. Oh, hello there, Kakashi. Having a fun afternoon, I see. Yeah. Tsunade swept him with an amused look and tilted her head as she innocently pointed at her previous sugar bomb of tea with an inviting smile. Kakashi fainted. While Tsunade and Yujito babysat Koyuki, Sosetsu was being babysat by Rei. Sosetsu was currently sitting behind a round table in the meeting room of his castle, waiting for the Yukikage to show up for a little bit of chat. The prick is really taking his sweet time. Rei, who was hidden in a dark corner of the room, thought bitterly. The Yukikage was supposed to be there for an hour already. Sigh, if only the land of snow had some kind of strong standing army. Yukikage would never dare to do this. This was a problem with small ninja villages. They usually cared for country politics, because it was bringing them some benefits. The bigger countries had no such problems for one reason or another. For example, the land of wind. Yes, the daimyo hated Raza with a passion, which could be seen in the steady economic decline of Suna. It was nothing much as of now, but Rei knew it would get a whole lot worse. So then, why won't Raza simply assassinate the daimyo and put somebody who favors him on the top? That's what happens most of the time behind the scenes of the countries with small ninja villages when they get far too much power. No longer do these villages have to painstakingly beg for funds while wagging their tails at their owners. They simply use what they are the best at to become the said owners. Rei saw Sosetsu lacked three things many daimyo of richer and bigger nations had. Firstly, they had their own freaking ninja guards. Assassination suddenly became a whole lot harder when 10 Jonin-level ninjas guarded the target. It would most likely be stopped before the guy was dead, which would result in retaliation, and daimyos kind of never played fair in this department. They would never use open warfare against ninja villages because, well, they would lose. Instead, they almost always used money, refusing to fund them, ruining their reputation by spreading the fact they tried to assassinate him, and so on and on. Hence why every ninja who accepted a mission to assassinate some kind of daimyo, no matter how small the country was already written off as a rogue ninja. If he managed to successfully accomplish the mission without anyone knowing about his identity, this record would vanish and nobody would talk about it. If he didn't, well. Secondly, reputation. On paper, the whole concept of a village of superpowered ninja warriors seems strong, nice, and appealing. How the heck could such a thing be toppled by a powerless, withered old chump such as daimyo, right? Shouldn't he be afraid? And here Rei wanted to groan every time he thought about this. Surprisingly, no ninja village was self-sufficient, and it had an excellent reason. A reason why he went for a place such as the Land of Snow, which is ruled by a kind-hearted, but still somewhat competent wimp such as Sosetsu. The daimyo more often than not had control over merchants to some degree. Konoha was a picture-perfect example of this. The supposedly strongest village that is able to rally up and work together, civilians and ninjas alike, to protect it even when they are facing enemies on three fronts. During the war, the civilian council made damn sure to do their work and give the Hokage time to focus more on the war efforts than running the village. Now, they are subtly sabotaging the village whenever possible. And Rei knew not all of it was because they were bored. The Fire Daimyo had his own grubby hands in it. The Hokage knew it. The Konoha Shinobi Council knew it. But what can they do when the man who is feeding them is behind the scenes? Especially after the catastrophe with Kyubi? At the very least, it had its advantages. So many merchants/saboteurs meant they were the richest village and didn't fully depend on the Fire Daimyo. But this was just yet another layer of dependence on the daimyo in itself. Konoha clans knew their wealth came to existence thanks to the daimyo and his support of their businesses. Merchants preferred to do business with them, gave them discounts, and much more. There was really not much the Hokage could do when even the clan heads were supremely reluctant to deal with the civilian council simply because of who stood behind them. And then, the civilian council couldn't do too much damage to the village either. Firstly, most of their wealth kind of depended on the existence of ninjas, and secondly, the daimyo wanted the village to exist as some kind of a buffer. Since these ninja villages sprang up, there was no war between the major countries of the elemental nations. The wars were fought by the ninjas while the daimyos and nobles watched from the front rows, as if it was some kind of sport, occasionally sending in a few samurai squads to deal with some breaches if enemy ninjas actually managed to enter the country. The system worked like clockwork in every major village. While the ninja villages had brute power, the daimyos and the nobles were political and economic powerhouses who simply used the system that had been set up for centuries to hinder them and keep them exactly where they wanted, which was horribly missing in the Land of Snow, causing the Yukigekure to grow a bit too big pair of horns. According to Tsunade, the sole exception to this rule was Konoha when it was ruled by the Senju. And it had a good reason why the Fire Daimyo started harassing it only around 10 years after Sarutobi became the third Hokage, and the Senju clan was on the brink of extinction. Rei glanced into the opposite corner of the room where the young Kakashi was hidden, completely oblivious to Rei's presence in the room. Seals sewn into the clothing were simply that broken. It is kind of ironic, isn't it? The masters of espionage, infiltration, and assassination are being spied upon by lowly merchants. All that is needed is a list of their expenses and some rumors for the daimyo, or the nobles to know what is currently going on in the village. The saddest part, the corner of Rei's lips twitched. Most jonin have no idea it is going on. After all, there was a perfect reason why Sarutobi was so thrilled. Rei rolled his eyes. When the younger monkey wanted to become one of the Fire Daimyo guards. I mean, other than the fact it was a bit humiliating for his son to be one. Lazing around on the ceiling, while making sure that probably the safest man in the whole country is safe. Prestigious position, my ass. The door finally opened and inside walked a small man with shaggy brown hair and a self-important expression, clad in what looked like armor. Ray blinked before a proverbial light bulb went on in his head. So that is the earlier stage of the chakra armor? The only selling point of Kaioshin? Looks a bit bulky and useless, to be honest. Suzufumi, welcome. Sosetsu smiled and gestured towards the empty chair opposite him. Makoto Suzufumi, the Yukikage, just walked towards it, not even bothering to greet Sosetsu. Behind him, on his right side was Dodo, and on his left side was Nadar Roga. Both gave at least a slight bow to Sosetsu before sitting down next to Makoto. After all, it was common courtesy. Even if Dodo planned to kill his brother, he would at least bow in greeting before he got to the bloody work. The man was still his brother. Ouch! Judging by the way Dodo and Nadar are looking at the uncultured prick of a Yukikage, the guy is not supposed to last long in his position. Ray noted with amusement. Well, not that it matters now that I am here. Makoto grunted and his gaze landed directly on Kakashi, causing his lips to briefly twitch before he narrowed his eyes at Sosetsu. Let's get straight to the point, Sosetsu. I want independence. Sosetsu stared at Makoto, completely startled out of his wits. He knew the snow bastard would ask this exact question, but never would he expect he would be so blunt and rude about it. It was finally driven home for Sosetsu just how arrogant Makoto was. This is the man leading a village that is supposed to protect my country from the shadows? I really screwed up with Yukigekure, didn't I? His eyes then trailed to the figure of his brother, Dodo, hiding a measure of surprise. What the hell is he doing here? Sosetsu's mind went into overdrive, trying to think up a good reason for him to be present. He liked his brother, and still wanted to refuse he would actually have a part in this scheme, but him being in the presence of the Yukikage was a deep blow to that trust. So, in the end, everything in these documents was really true. Sosetsu mentally slumped in defeat, while outwardly maintaining a picture of courtesy. I am willing to give you some level of independence for certain concessions on your part, but autonomy is impossible. What do you say? Makoto looked at Sosetsu funnily, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He didn't even try to hide his disbelief and let it show on his face, maybe even a bit exaggerating it on purpose. Are you sure you want to be like this? Makoto airily asked, giving a glance at Dodo. Look, we are both leaders. We both want the best for our people. Ray almost snorted when he heard that. He made sure to investigate the Yukikage a bit, before coming here, and Makoto Suzufumi was a picture-perfect example of a selfish money grubber. The only thing he ever invested in at his own expense was the chakra armors, and even that was because the guy was for some reason somehow obsessed with them, spending millions of Ryo on their development. Honestly, Ray was baffled by it. The bulky junk wasn't even that good. Sure, it could protect a person against ninjutsu, and give him an overall boost to his abilities through a mechanical chakra circulation system to key points of the armor. On top of that, albeit slightly, the armor still helped with chakra control, making jutsu more powerful and less demanding on the user. This made even a genin have capabilities of a jonin after a few months of practice, which was awesome, but the thing had to be built mostly with lightweight chakra metal, hence expensive as heck. On paper, it was perfect war gear. In reality, the main problem outside of the cost was that the wearers could only reach jonin rank with it, meaning the second they encountered S-rank ninja or above, they would be melted almost instantly. After all, it still had many weak spots and openings that could be poked, let's say with a kunai. Then the users of the chakra armor often got too used to using it and stopped developing their own capabilities, relying on the armor instead. That meant the quality of the Yukigekure ninjas actually lowered since the armor started to be manufactured. Think hard about what is best for this country, Sosetsu. Makoto continued with a pressing tone. I don't think a civil war is something you would like to have on your conscience. I am actually giving you a way out here, you see? I am trying to help you. By giving Yukigekure full autonomy, we will still help the land of snow. Naturally, we are living in it, after all. It's just that the price will be a bit hig-. Utterly ridiculous, Sosetsu finished for him in a cold and a bit angry tone. That's what you want to say, right? Sosetsu knew Makoto cared mostly about Yukigekure's power, which translated to chakra armors, which meant they needed more money. What Makoto tried to do here was to get autonomy, so he could actually start taking a protection fee from the land of snow and be able to approve more human-oriented experimentation when it came to the armors by himself, not needing the permission of the daimyo. In the end, you want money and power over the state. Don't hide it. Be clear. Don't you have any pride? Sosetsu barely held himself back from shouting. Hearing him, Makoto frowned, his eyes hardening. This was not a result he imagined. Not in the slightest. He always took Sosetsu for a weakling who could only butter up to the masses. The sheer thought of such a person trying to oppose him was an utterly ridiculous notion for him. I think, he started in a measured manner, making sure to put weight in every word, that you should look more into the long-term gains rather than the short-term losses. Once Yukigekure develops better armors and starts mass-producing them, we will be the strongest ninja village. Even the emotionless and depressed Kakashi lifted an eyebrow at that, while Rei only face-bombed at Mikado, revealing such a thing, while knowing there was a ninja from a different village present. The man probably didn't count on Kakashi surviving today. The land of snow will become the most impo dash. No. Do you really believe some piece of metal can make you the strongest? Once you have strong chakra armor in great numbers, then what? You will need wearers, more ninjas. You will start mass recruiting from the common populace. You will eventually start a war. A war I doubt we would be able to win no matter on how high pedestal these chakra armors are in your head. Absolutely not. I refuse. Sosetsu turned towards Dodo. Don't you see it, brother? His goals are insane. Why are you? Sosetsu, however, quieted down before he could finish that sentence as a very controlled killing intent of Rei landed on his shoulders, making him choke the words back, showing a conflicted expression. In the end, he just deflated with a sigh. Rei already told Sosetsu what Dodo's plans were. To ask him why he wanted to create a coup right now would screw quite a bit of Rei's plans, so he simply had to stop Sosetsu from being an idiot and blurting out he knew about their plans and preparations. Dodo simply shook his head at his brother, inwardly highly amused at his antics, while Mikado was simply exasperated. Here I go out of my way and try to persuade the fool, and he just won't budge. Ugh, how frustrating. Fine, let's go with this. Lord Kazahana, I see you are unreasonable simply for the sake of being unreasonable, instead of trying to be constructive here. I am going to give you one last chance, so listen very carefully. If the happiness and safety of your people is not such a big deal for you, then I wonder if your daughter is important enough. Mikado said, and the entire room became completely still. Damn, that was quite a straightforward threat, Rei thought, awkwardly grimacing at how it was said. Sosetsu felt chills creep up his spine as nervousness started filling him, making him fidget. Under the table, he gave Kakashi a hand gesture, ordering him to go to Koyuki. Kakashi only very reluctantly listened and sneakily, but hastily left the room, not even leaving a clone behind. I guess experience is something he would have to build up some more. Rei hummed, looking at the intense stare-down between Mikado with threatening narrowed eyes and fidgeting Sosetsu who, while looking like a scared chipmunk, didn't break off the eye contact. Normally, now would be the time to quietly wait and glare at each other until Koyuki either appears captured or a message of her safety reaches Sosetsu. The negotiation would not go either way unless Mikado decided to straight-up kill Sosetsu, but that would create more problems for him than solutions. And that's where Dodo comes in. Rei's lips stretched into a smile as he prepared to defend Sosetsu when he saw Nadar and Dodo glancing at each other from behind the unsuspecting Mikado. To his misfortune, Mikado didn't have the best reflexes as he was too used to eating and shrugging off hits when wearing the armor. His only reaction to having a sword run through his heart from behind was to look at the blade, sticking out of his chest with wide, disbelieving eyes, as a trail of blood slowly flowed from the corner of his lips down his chin. He was dead before he could even comprehend how. As Nadar pulled the sword out of Mikado, letting his corpse fall down, Sosetsu only despondently watched Dodo going for a kunai, lunging at him with a ferocious expression. It really drove the point that his brother wanted to kill him home. As for Rei, here we go.